There's the age-old question, what makes someone want to run for president? And then there's the question of how the candidate announces. It can be at a rally, in a newspaper, a television interview. French socialist Lionel Jospin launched his ill-fated 2002 run via a fax sent to the AFP news agency. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he's opting for Twitter, not a tweet, but a live discussion hosted by none other than the boss of said social media platform. Elon Musk insists the event does not constitute an endorsement on his part. But if the medium is the message, then what does this launch say about the candidate and the times we live in? Back in 2016, before DeSantis' main rival was first banned and reinstated to Twitter, Donald Trump upended his U.S. politics, not just with his missives on Twitter, but his old-school phone-in interviews, but also the quiet backing of Silicon Valley scions like PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel and some canny behind-the-scenes data mining later uncovered in the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Back then, Facebook was the big battleground. Where will the election of 2024 be won? Of course, it's also about policy and personality. We'll ask about 44-year-old Ron DeSantis, his run-ins with Trump, and his bet on anti-woke politics that even have him in a showdown with Disney. Where will the Republican nomination in the general election be won, and on what issues? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking about what some may consider to be Twitter's candidate. And joining us from the capital of Ohio, Columbus, Republican strategist Jay Shabria. Thanks for joining us.
For having me.
From New York City, journalist Kyle Spencer, author of Raising Them Right, The Untold Story of America's Ultra-Conservative Youth Movement. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome back as well to Fabrice Epelboin, lecturer in information warfare at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
And from Washington, France 24 correspondent Ketevan Gorjestani. And it feels like, Ket, that we're now really heading into the thick of it with this announcement. The election is on. How are you feeling?
Pretty good, waiting for this to get on really on track, because we've been waiting for Ron DeSantis' announcement for a while now. It's been months of speculation, and now it's finally going to be official. He's really seen as the main challenger for Donald Trump.
All right, the France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation you have on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, Joe Biden announced his re-election with a video posted to social media. Ron DeSantis opting for a live-streamed conversation with a host who's arguably a lot more famous. Tonya Kerrigan has more.
It's a new form of power couple, tech multi-billionaire and US presidential hopeful.
We'll be interviewing Ron DeSantis, and he has quite an announcement to make. And it'll be the first time that something like this is happening on social media.
The tech tycoon says this isn't a formal endorsement of the candidate, but the setup gives DeSantis access to Musk's 140 million followers and could prove a boost to the struggling platform. Musk's vision is to transform Twitter into X, an everything app, a messaging platform featuring games, photo sharing, shopping and banking. But since Musk's takeover, the platform is floundering, and a raft of initiatives have failed to make Twitter profitable. A new role, then, for the platform.
But I am interested in, X/Twitter being somewhat of a public town square.
DeSantis's polling, too, could use a boost. After being branded Ron DeSanctimonious, Meatball Ron, and even accused of grooming high school girls with alcohol by the MAGA Republican camp. A veteran of Iraq and Guantanamo Bay, Governor DeSantis boasts that he has loosened gun control and limited access to abortion in Florida during his first term.
So the stakes are high. I think what we showed in Florida is that if you show bold leadership, if you pursue a bold agenda, you can beat these people.
The Twitter stunt is risky, not least because it ties his presidential bid to the famously unpredictable Twitter CEO. But DeSantis hopes the association with the rich-list libertarian could raise his profile next to the already infamous Trump.
Fabrice Epelboin, is it a risky launch?
No, not at all. He will probably have more viewers using Twitter this way than CNN could ever dream of. It's a pretty smart move to do this on Twitter. It's modern. Everybody's on Twitter. It's an international audience. He can reach the world and become visible to the world, which is not the case right now. Trump, everybody knows Trump worldwide, but this guy, nobody knows him outside the United States. So definitely Twitter is the place to be to do this, to be an international launch of an American campaign. And since the issue of this campaign is going to concern the world, we better, as foreigner, get accustomed to who is this guy and what are his views compared to Trump, because even if we're not going to vote for him, we're going to be impacted by the result.
Jay Shabria, you hear that? The whole world is watching.
Yeah, and I honestly don't think that that's the motivation for Ron DeSantis. I don't think that when you do American politics, you're not really worried about what the world is perceiving. You're worried about the voters that you can move. I don't know that it's a dangerous or a risky play, but I don't know how smart it is either. As I understand it, he's doing it on Twitter Spaces, which is mostly an audio platform. So he's not going to have the associated visuals that are so important to American politics. The American flags, the folks that are cheering you on in the background. Those are the types of things I think he's leaving on the table when he's doing it this way. I'm not saying there's not a place for Twitter. There's not a place for Twitter Spaces. There's not a place for Facebook. But to do it exclusively this way, I think he's leaving votes on the table.
Kyle Spencer, you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree with Tri. I'd say that Twitter actually doesn't reach as many people as you would think. It's in many ways a sort of elite space for political junkies. I think it's a little dated right now. It's kind of got a stale feeling to it. So I think it makes him feel a little bit irrelevant. So yeah, I'd say not a smart idea on his part. And I think it suggests what we already kind of know about him, which he's sort of flat-footed. He doesn't quite get the rhythm of the national vibe.
So if he's doing it over Twitter, and he's doing it with Elon Musk, the question is why? Who's getting more coverage, Kedevan? Is it Musk or is it DeSantis?
I think they're both benefiting at least from the publicity of this because it is a first. And as some of the other guests said, they're both looking a little bit for a boost. We heard it in that report that you played. So it's really a win-win in that sense, in the sense of the publicity and the fact that we're talking about this leading up to this conversation between Elon Musk and Ron DeSantis. But I think for Ron DeSantis, even though, yes, maybe Twitter is not reaching as many people as it used to, but it has turned very much to the right since Elon Musk really took over. And so for Ron DeSantis, I think there is this idea, at least that's what they believe, which is that they'll be able to speak to this conservative group that is present on Twitter, that it is going to give them access to those people. And another thing to be said is that with this conversation with Elon Musk on Twitter, it's a new thing, and it feeds into what he's trying to do, which is sort of compete with Donald Trump on this idea that he's not part of the establishment, even though he's the governor of Florida and he's been in politics for a while now. This gives him a sort of street cred in the sense that he's trying to disrupt the traditional media landscape, that type of strategy. That said, he is also doing some of the traditional media announcement because he is set to be scheduled to follow up this conversation on Twitter with an appearance on Fox News, the main conservative cable news channel. And then in the next few days, probably over the weekend, there will be a big rally, a traditional campaign-style rally. So he's trying to do a little bit of everything, something new, something different, and of course the traditional big media appearance.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, Jay Shabria. Is the idea that Donald Trump now has his own social medium, Truth Social, and that Ron DeSantis hopes to corner fans or followers on Twitter?
Yeah. So look, I think what I would take exception to what was just said is that it's gotten more conservative. I think it's been more open to conservatives, and that meaning Twitter. So I think there are conservatives now feel welcome on that platform when they didn't before. But going to the question directly that you expressed, the brilliance of Donald Trump was that he was able to send a tweet in 2016, and every single news station, whether it was local media, national media, left-wing media, they all covered it. Will they do that with Ron DeSantis as well? Now, look, I think that there's a hope amongst the media elite that Ron DeSantis proves to be a worthy rival to Donald Trump, both electorally and in the ability to say outrageous things. I'm not sure that's the case, and we're going to have to wait and see on that. But Donald Trump married that wonderful media presence that he had that was able to just saturate the markets with also tremendous grassroots support, rallies all across the country that had huge numbers, that truly did have huge numbers, and things that we hadn't seen in a long time in politics. And he was able to use that for electoral success. The question is, can Ron DeSantis do it? He's got other challengers nipping at his heels as well, too. So we can't forget those, too. Other people that are running for president, which does not help him in this primary process.
I want to get back to the challenges facing Ron DeSantis because there are many. But first, Fabrice Epedouin. Elon Musk, he was just in Paris. He was welcomed to the presidential palace. This is the same Elon Musk who's the boss of SpaceX, who has those Starlink low orbit satellites that help keep Ukraine connected to the web. He is trying to open a big factory in northern France.
Not to mention Tesla.
So what is his end game here? He insists that he's not endorsing Ron DeSantis.
Is quite clear. He's launching actually a streaming service. Tucker Carlson is probably going to be among the first to use it. There's a way to make money with it if you're a content creator. Twitter is going to let you win money by producing content and broadcasting it on Twitter.
But as a captain of industry, don't want to appear to be too partisan, do you?
Honestly, Musk, he doesn't care. Really, he doesn't care. He really have absolutely nothing to care about what can be the consequences. And he's been pretty vocal about that.
So is it a problem for Emmanuel Macron? Will he be welcoming Musk back to the French presidential palace? If
He doesn't have any choice. I mean, you cannot do without Musk. Typically for us French, the future of cars in France is either Chinese or Elon Musk. There's no way our own industry is going to survive. There is no way you can do without Musk. Whether you like him or not, you have to do with Musk. He's not only controlling, he's instrumental in the war in Ukraine. Without Musk, there wouldn't be any war in Ukraine. The Russians would have won by far. He's instrumental for renewing the car industry, and that's really important for climate change. He's instrumental for space exploration, and that's more problem for the United States. We have our own space industry that still survives, but still, when you look at SpaceX, who knows how long we'll survive this industry? So there is no way you can do without Musk.
Kyle Spencer, politicians may come and go, but the world can't do without Elon Musk?
Sad state of affairs. I'm not sure it's true that the world can't do without Elon Musk, but it is true that he has an enormous amount of power. I will say that the Tesla is a real problem for a lot of Americans because the introduction of electric cars has just been a really monumental and amazing thing internationally, but here in our country in particular. And so Elon Musk started out as a bit of a savior, a global, environmental savior, and has now turned into a kind of enemy, which is confusing for a lot of people. But in terms of Elon Musk's having Ron DeSantis on and having him introduce Ron DeSantis to the country as a presidential candidate, I think that's just Elon Musk's kind of childish side where he wants to be in the playground and be playing with the big kids.
Is that how you see it, Jay Shabria?
I don't see that at all. I think Elon Musk, I mean, to call him an enemy, I think is pretty an outrageous charge there. I mean, look, the guy, there's a big problem here where conservatives feel like that they are silenced, that every time they have an issue, that the left or the big institutions make sure that they silence them. All Elon Musk has done is allowed conservatives to have a voice. Look, I bet you that if Elizabeth Warren or if Bernie Sanders wanted to come on Twitter and host something or announce their presidential bids or whenever that would be, I bet you he would want that there too, because what he is trying to do is encourage conversation, encourage free speech, and I have no qualms about what he's doing with the Twitter platform, and I own a Tesla as well too, so I love it.
Ketevan Gorgistani, what is the street cred? You talked about street cred earlier of Elon Musk these days on Capitol Hill.
Well, it's a little bit of a love-hate relationship. So maybe he's not definitely the enemy, but there is this feeling that you can't really do in politics without Twitter. You have the presence of almost all politicians on Twitter. They use it. They need it. They need it for their announcements. You said it yourself that Joe Biden put out a video on Twitter. So Elon Musk is sort of the gatekeeper of Twitter, whether you like him or not. And so people on Capitol Hill and in Washington and politicians across the country here really just have dealt with this and are using it as much as they can, while, of course, a lot of times coming from the left, there has been criticism of Elon Musk himself, but you haven't really seen a widespread wave of Democratic politicians, for example, quitting Twitter in protest over Elon Musk and the way he's handled the platform. So I think there is a realization that they need Elon Musk. Maybe Elon Musk also needs them. And so there is this sort of understanding that Elon Musk can say what he wants. He can handle his platform the way he wants. And also the politicians here can also attack him, criticize him, but still continue to use the platform.
All right. And as Jay Shabir was saying, with or without Elon Musk, Ron DeSantis does have his work cut out. Polls showed Donald Trump clobbering all comers so far. Here you see a poll of polls done by Real Clear Politics. On Truth Social, the former president's social medium, the frontrunner again telling his fans this Wednesday that it's thanks to him that DeSanctimonious, as he likes to call him, upset the frontrunner to win the Florida governorship in 2018. He says, what do you call them? I don't know if you call them tweets. He says, in one day, he went from losing badly to winning by a lot with 3 large Trump rallies. He won the general election in an upset. Disloyal, all in capital letters. Kyle Spencer, what the rest of the world wants to know is, are we going to be like reliving the 2016 election where, you have tweets and bombast and outrage?
I certainly hope not. But I do think that there's a lot of concern that we're going to have this repeat. And for Democrats, the problem is how to keep the electorate excited and appropriately concerned about a potential Trump presidency, because at the end of the day, I do think it's going to be a battle between Trump and probably Biden. But I do want to just say something about Jai's talking point that this discussion about Twitter being some place where right-wingers were not able to express their opinion. That's a very common radical right talking point in the United States. It's repeated many, many times, incessantly and obsessively, and it's absolutely and totally untrue. The right wing in the United States' speech is not silenced. Right-wingers speak often and with a lot of fervor. And in many ways speak things that are absolutely totally untrue, lies that get spread rapidly online. So this idea that the right wing does not have free speech in the United States is just a lie, but also something that the right wing and its advocates like to tell people incessantly.
Jay Shabria?
Thanks for calling me a right-winger. My background shows I'm very much not a right-winger. Number two, thanks for calling me a liar. That I think that there's lots of facts here that to show that, especially during COVID. Let's take COVID, for example, where conservatives were silenced. When anyone that actually mentioned the fact that there could be a lab leak was taken off of social media. That is censorship, and that's what happened. Look, you can say that I have talking points. I think your talking points are very, very standard here. Getting back to Ron DeSantis here, I think the real problem that Ron DeSantis has is that he has challengers that are nipping at his heels, and we should talk a little bit about that too, because I think what Trump is trying to do here, Trump is really all for all these other candidates getting in here, because the more candidates that come in, they dilute the ability for Ron DeSantis to be a viable challenger, and I think he's going to have a real problem with that going forward.
People just, Ketevan Gorjestani, don't know the candidates in America. There isn't the visibility.
It's true in a sense, but my experience, at least with Trump supporters, is not really that of they don't know Ron DeSantis. Because over the past couple of years, going to Trump rallies, going to Republican events, speaking to Republican voters, especially those very hardcore Trump supporters, I used to ask the question of if you're in the situation that there is no Donald Trump for whatever reason, who would be the other person that you would like to see running for president in 2024? And every single time, the only name that came up was Ron DeSantis. So at least in the very Trump base, there is a knowledge of Ron DeSantis because he was seen as a sort of the brainchild of Donald Trump. He was really close to Donald Trump at the very beginning. He's been extremely successful, at least in Florida. He's very popular among Republicans. He won re-election. You can say that the Democratic candidate was not the greatest candidate that they could have put forward, but he won by 20 points in Florida, and so he does have a sort of appeal in the base. He does not, of course, have the recognition of Donald Trump, but he is someone that people have been talking about for a while. So I don't think that he lacks the sort of name recognition in the country. I think what his challenge mostly will be is how does he position himself when it comes to Trump? Because my question to those Trump supporters was, what happens if Donald Trump is not here? But when Donald Trump is here, how do you work your way? How are you more Trump than Trump, less Trump than Trump? Trump without the drama, which is how Ron DeSantis used to sort of frame himself, because he's really going for the policies of Donald Trump. But the question is, do people want to vote for someone who is not the original, or do they want to go with the actual original? And to the point one of the guests made earlier, those other candidates like Nikki Haley, like Tim Scott, they're the ones who are going to take the votes of the people who don't want to see Trump. But Ron DeSantis is not that person if he tries to embody and to replicate the Trumpism. He's not going to get the votes of those more moderate Republicans or those who are tired of the Trump drama. They're not going to go for Ron DeSantis.
Well, it certainly sounds like Ron DeSantis has decided to double down on this anti-wokeism, as it's called, and it's something that comes up in every single one of his rallies, speeches, and interviews.
I can tell you this, in Florida, girls are going to play girls' sports and boys are going to play boys' sports. That's what we're doing, and we're going to make sure that that's the reality.
The 44-year-old Republicans even decided to pick a fight with Mickey Mouse, Disney, which employs 75,000 staff as its theme park in Florida, pushing back against last year's passage of Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay law that forbids discussion of sexual orientation in elementary school classrooms. Another law now obliges schools to ban books within 5 days. If one of the parents complains about it, the publication can then be reinstated upon review. Example, this week, a Miami area school banning The Hill We Climb. That was the poem read by Amanda Gorman at Joe Biden's 2017 inauguration. Fabrice Epelbois, your reaction to what we're seeing in the United States and why these culture war issues are featuring so prominently.
Oh, we're importing this in France, so we have maybe 1 or 2 years beside the United States and looking at what's happening in the United States enable us, France, to know what's going to happen here within a few years. So we have the same culture war.
So you think in 2027, the French presidential election will be on issues like this?
It is already on issues like this. I mean, if you don't look at the media, because we have basically the same problem, most media in France are Democrats, and there are very few Republican media. Except that in France, what is the Republican media is extreme right. And the rest is roughly what we call in France center, middle, and what would be considered the United States Democrat. But most media, including public media, are all Democrats. So basically, everybody who doesn't vote Democrat, the equivalent of Democrat in France, is looking at social media for information. And most information that could favor Republican point of view are censored.
The equivalent of the Republican.
The equivalent of the Republican point of view are censored in most media.
How so censored? I mean, the top news channel, the public news channel in France, CNews is
precisely the only media who is not on this point of view. But it's a very popular media that talks to basically things that concern France. For example, the Durham report, the Durham Council investigation, totally censored in French. It's kind of interesting, but in France, in the Democrat, and I have to be a full disclosure, if I was an American, not only would I be Democrat, but I would probably vote for Bernie Sanders. But beside that, I'm an information warfare analyst. And from this point of view, there is a massive censorship of everything that could favor the Republican point of view in the French media. And it's roughly the same, as far as I can see, in the United States. That's a major problem because, for example, let's take the Twitter files, the big leaks of what was Twitter before Elon Musk. It's extremely interesting because it gives every detail of what is Musk's plan, where is he heading, what is his point of view, what is he going to do. And since it's been censored, also, journalists have absolutely no idea what Elon Musk is up to. That's kind of stupid. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, you need the facts to realize what's going on. They are censoring the fact, therefore they cannot understand what's going on with Twitter or with many, many other things.
With so many echo chambers these days, Jay Shabria, where is the conversation going to happen during the 2024 presidential race? Where is the place where people are talking?
This is a really great question. And look, as a political strategist, I do campaigns, I do races. This is how we try to figure out how to communicate with voters. They do care about their own little echo chambers, and whether it's Fox News, MSNBC, which is the right and the left typical channels here in the US. They go to social media a lot. They talk to their friends and family. So you try to build these institutions where you can actually try to touch them in multiple different ways. People here in the States, they're going to their own channels now. They're building almost their own channels for their information of who they trust. And that's the real challenge. And look, I will tell you, it is the mainstream media's fault for the decades of making sure that there is a big part of the population that they're not going to actually acknowledge them or even.
But
talk
Jay,
about
let me
them.
ask you: there's still this perception that in the United States, it's the independent voters, the moderates, that are going to swing the election either way. You're suggesting that it's all you need is energized people who are very passionate one side or the other?
Yeah, I think obviously independents are important, moderates are important when you're trying to put a voting coalition together, but I think they're far less important than your base in terms of actually winning a race in most states. And that also works for the presidential because remember, our presidential election is a series of state elections. So it's really a lot about how can you get the folks that are going to turn out for you, get them out more. And then obviously even the independents, they usually lean either Republican or Democrat. So you're trying to get the Republican leaning on my side voters to come out for you in greater numbers than the other side. That's largely where this rests.
Kyle Spencer, there are no moderates. It's either one side or the other.
I actually think that what Jai's saying is really true. There's a lot of debate in the United States about how you win an election. Do you win an election by turning the moderates and changing their minds? Do you, or changing hearts and minds, or do you win elections by getting folks out to vote, folks who traditionally have been left on the table? And I think the general consensus at this point is that the parties win by getting their voters out and by expanding the number of voters that actually get to the polls, which is one of the reasons why you see so much voter suppression coming out of the Republican Party, because it helps to keep Democratic voters out of the polls. But I would say that once we have to make a decision about who's going to be the candidates, this culture war issues and issues around LGBTQ rights, and if DeSantis is the candidate, a war with Disney, these are unpopular with people and they're not going to fly. And so for the general population getting out there to vote, his insistence on some of these issues will actually help turn out Democrats who are frankly really disgusted by this kind of talk and by this kind of prejudice that he pushes in his own state and tries to push nationally.
Of course, Ketevan Gorjestani, perhaps we're talking at cross purposes here, because there are primary races and there's a general election, and it's not the same voters in a way.
No, and we saw that over the midterms. Some of the candidates by the Republican Party and Republicans themselves had to sort of analyze what happened there. That big red wave that didn't materialize was in part, not completely, but in part, the result of having some candidates that were so extreme that, of course, they won the nomination, but then for the general, they had to be elected, especially when it came to senators' races or governor races. They had to be elected with the whole state, and they had to appeal, at least in part, to some of the moderates, some of the independents, and they didn't manage to do that because they had gone too far to the right in order to win the primary election. Then there's another issue, which is that when you go to this election, your guests were saying the importance of bringing out the base. You have to fire up that base. And we saw, again, looking back to the midterms, what worked to bring out the Democrats. It was not so much anything that the Democrats did. What brought out a lot of Democratic voters, a lot of young voters, a lot of women, especially in the Midwest, abortion. The attacks on access to abortion was a godsend for the Democrats, and it could likely be used again for the 2024 election. So even if you talk about these culture wars as something that works to get the Republican base fired up, the question is, does it also fire up the Democratic base to turn out to vote? That's really the calculation that has to be made there. On both sides, both the Democrats and the Republican, which one is going to bring out the most of your own base without firing up the other side's base to compensate for what you've just done?
Jay Shabry, have you done forensics on the midterm elections?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I was involved very much in the midterm elections, and I actually disagree with the media trope that this was just the conservatives gone. It was just too conservative. I think it was a lot of bad candidates and a lot of bad campaigns. I will agree with that. There are campaigns do matter. I think the common refrain in the media is it's just about the message, but they really don't go deep into actually how the campaigns are run. And I will say that on our side, we ran a lot of bad campaigns around the country. Going back to what's going to happen in 2024, though, the Democrats have a big problem, too. They have a very unpopular president. And his policies. So, sure, maybe there's some policies on the conservative side, on the Republican side, that are deemed too conservative by moderates. But at the end of the day, what normally drives elections are pocketbook issues. And inflation is still high. People don't feel good about things. Gallup just did their poll, and 16% of Americans believe America's on the wrong track. We haven't seen numbers like that since the 2009 housing bubble. We've got big issues in this country, and Joe Biden's at the helm.
But inflation was high during the midterms as well.
Inflation was high, and look, again, I think those are a series of different races. And when you look at it, we ran some bad races in some certain states. I won't defend the actual way in which they ran those races. I happened to run a race here in Ohio. We won, and it was there was a lot of outside looking in. We happened to win. I think we ran a good race. But what I'm saying is that inflation is still high. Jobs are not great. People feel disconnected to the big institutions, and Joe Biden is that big institution. And I think he's got a big problem coming in.
Kyle Spencer, you agree?
I think that the best thing that can happen for Democrats in 24 is that Ron DeSantis or Trump or another radical candidate gets the nomination. And I think what Jai says is true to some extent. Democrats will come out to vote against Republicans, to vote against Republican policies that are completely and totally out of touch with the American people. I think also what your correspondent said is true. Reproductive rights and the robbing of American women of their reproductive rights all around the country was, sadly, in a political way, the best thing that ever happened to Democrats. It has woken them up to see what they are really up against, and a huge Republican well-funded machine. I think it's absolutely untrue that those candidates didn't win because their campaigns weren't well run in the midterms. Those candidates didn't win because their policies are very, very unpopular and very out of touch with the average American.
All right, we see disagreement there on that issue. One of the questions, again, we hark back, and Fabrice Appelboin, you've been here on this show to comment when there was the Cambridge Analytica scandal that broke, how there was not just data mining done that caught people unawares, but disinformation, both in 2016 and in 2020. Here in Paris, the creator of ChatGPT paying a visit this Tuesday. He's on a barnstorming tour of Europe. The CEO of OpenAI welcome to the French presidential palace, where he reiterated the same message as last week before the U.S. Congress. Regulate us. He warns of the dangers of AI heading into 2024.
We are quite concerned about the impact this can have on elections. I think this is an area where hopefully the entire industry and the government can work together quickly.
Will AI be a game changer in this election in 2024?
It already is, and it's been like that for the past 10 years. What you're looking at in the United States, and it's the same situation in France, is polarization of public opinion. What used to be a nation where you can have a consensus in France, in the United States, in most democratic country, is not possible because you have only extreme.
All right, so explain to us how you put artificial intelligence to use for winning an election.
Oh, there's many ways. The first way is to use this polarization. And this polarization is the effect of artificial intelligence applied to content. The same technology that gives you your next favorite show on Netflix is used by Facebook and by most social networks to give you the next piece of content you are going to consume. This is polarizing public opinion. It's been doing so for the past 10 years. Now we're talking about another generation of artificial intelligence. It's a different kind of technology. It's still artificial intelligence, but it's an artificial intelligence you can look at as intelligent. Whereas when you see Netflix telling you you're going to like this show, there's nothing similar to human intelligence that makes you believe that this is artificial intelligence. But it is artificial intelligence, and it already has a huge impact in society and has been having a huge impact in society for the past 10 years. Cambridge Analytica was using mildly artificial intelligence, and it's been quite effective. And it's totally derailed the 2016 election. Twitter has been using not any single piece of artificial intelligence, but still it has been derailing the Joe Biden's election and totally censoring typically Republican content. And this has been documented, whether you like it or not. It is not a nothing burger. It's an important...
Wait, even now Twitter is censoring?
Nobody knows, but the truth is, every single Democrat is really afraid that Musk might do the same thing to favor the Republican. The thing is, before Musk, Twitter was doing some hardcore censorship, a very sophisticated censorship named shadow banning, to favor the Democrats' point of view. And everybody's afraid that Musk might do the opposite, and they're right to be afraid. He might just do this. Or maybe another social network, who knows, TikTok and the Chinese, might derail the next election in the United States. But the thing is, since 2016, there hasn't been an election in the United States that hasn't been totally hijacked by social network.
Totally hijacked?
Totally hijacked. And if you look at the history of social network, the very first democracy who has been hijacked by social network is South Korea in 2012. So this has been going on since 10 years. That's the current situation. That's the thing we have to open our eyes to. And we have to go beyond partisanship and talking points.
So let's try to go to beyond partisanship. Kyle Spencer, I'll start with you. Are we the same as in 2016, only worse?
You mean in terms of interference in our elections?
In terms of, manipulation and censorship.
I mean, I am not, it's really hard to know what's going to happen in the coming months. I think it's a huge concern for this country, and we do so much and conduct so much business and conduct so much politicking online that manipulation and interference is an enormous concern for everybody, honestly. I will say, though, that for people who are on the ground organizing, who are trying to get young people out to vote, anyone out to vote, this really speaks to why relational organizing is so important, why it's so important to door knock, why it's so important to talk to people and have conversations in real time, because that's where you get to really talk without interference, without any types of manipulation. And the fact that, as one of your guests said, or as everybody has said, we live in a very polarized country right now. Again, that's not a good thing. But it does help when you're trying to organize, because people are so confused about what to believe in, and they tend to sort of stay in their cluster. And so if people in their cluster can help them to get to the polls and to vote for the candidates who are going to preserve democracy, that's a good thing. So the more that we can do offline, the better.
Jay Shabria, how much did you do offline in that race you mentioned in 2020? 2020.
Yeah, look,
excuse me.
The grassroots campaigns are always important, but I do think that in campaigns in general, they're much less important to actually winning than people think. I think that those kinds of things are a lot of times dated. There's a lot of other ways to get out the vote for your side and to actually do some convincing of those moderates.
J'ai été déconnecté.
Going back to what I think is going to happen with AI, I think this is a really dangerous time. Imagine a deep fake of one of the candidates, either Joe Biden or Donald Trump, and they're saying something. Those are the kinds of things that can really provide bad information to voters, where they start to actually believe it and they can't believe what they're seeing, because this it's already really good and it's going to just get better.
And you've seen evidence of that?
Oh, I mean, you see evidence all the time when you see people doing deepfakes, and they're good. But I think that's going to be the thing that to me, as a political consultant, that's the kind of thing that I worry about, because I don't know how you combat that with voters and how you convince them that that's not something that they're seeing that's real.
Regulators, when they had that talk where you heard that clip of Sam Altman, Jay Shabria, they were saying, why not issue licenses for those who have AI technology? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the right answer is, because this is going to be a serious policy conversation with Republicans, Democrats, Independents, because everyone's going to fall under what's going to happen here. So I think what's going to happen is, I bet you that Congress in the next 6 to 8 months, maybe a year, they're going to start to actually take a more serious look at this, and they're going to try to have to come together and see what there is. Because what we don't want to do is restrict free speech, especially on the Republican side. We don't want to do that, but we have to make sure that we take measures into account so that that the voters actually have opportunity to get what's a true message, not someone saying something that's not just plain false.
Ketevan Gorgestani, the 8 years since Donald Trump won in 2016, the rules of the game have not changed. How much has awareness changed?
Well, I think people are more aware of the possibilities of interference, of misinformation. All of that is true. But that being said, being aware that there is misinformation out there in the open doesn't mean that you're not going to fall for something that is misinformation, because we've seen also the change in how people get their news. They don't necessarily go to the traditional TV channels. They don't necessarily go to the traditional newspapers. They get their information on Twitter, on Instagram, especially younger generations. So they might be more aware that there is a possibility, but that said, it's also hard, even as a journalist, to always differentiate between what is real, what is false, what is misinformation, what is simply an ad campaign, which is, of course, political and biased by nature. But you're seeing more and more this mix and this sort of intertwining of reality, of misinformation, of artificial intelligence. Just take a look at the latest example, which is the Republican National Committee ad that was fully generated by AI, really presenting images of a sort of dystopian future of what it would be like to have Joe Biden win again in 2024. It's not necessarily false, it's just sort of thinking about what it could be like, but the fact that it's images, AI-generated images, really has a more powerful impact on people right now than saying that another 4 years where Joe Biden would be detrimental to the country. Images are still very, very strong, and that is something to pay attention to, but how you fix it and how you prevent people from getting sucked into that is very difficult to say.
All right, one of the questions that will be popping up throughout the first primaries are not until the month of January. Kedevan Gorgistani, many thanks for joining us from Washington. I want to thank Jay Shabria for being with us from Columbus, Ohio. Kyle Spencer in New York City. Fabrice Appelboin, thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.